Welcome to Let's Talk with Pastor Ngwaru's show. I'm your host, Michael Rugube Ngwaru. On this particular show, we discuss marriage, we discuss family, we discuss life in general, we discuss issues, business, economy, we discuss spirituality, we discuss religion, we discuss anything. This is like your one-stop shop. And for our discussion tonight, we are basically looking at decoloniality and the church. And of course, some of you could actually be saying, what is this thing called decoloniality? What use is it for us to discuss it? Let me remind you, friends, that this thing that we call decoloniality is influencing how people on the continent are thinking about themselves, how they're addressing the whole issue of identity and many of those things. And as a result, it's very difficult to ignore how people are beginning to think and how they are shaping their understanding of reality and of themselves. I know that this particular subject area has been the domain of activists, the domain of politicians, historians, and knowledge creators, and anthropologists, and the like. But what we are beginning to see these days, maybe from a few years back, and it's becoming more and more now, is that the Christian church, and when I say Christian church, I'm talking of anyone who believes in the Lord Jesus Christ, they are beginning to talk about decoloniality. So we need to find out exactly how does the church fit into this discussion, into this narrative? What role does the church think it plays in decoloniality? And to be able to help me manage this discussion is my co-host, Saneliso Mukwamoyo. She's an associate media house director here in Pretoria. If you may, Seed Media. Saneliso, good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. We have our three specialist panelists here. We have Professor Edith Paswana, we have Dr. Matema, we have Dr. Papu. These three are experts in their own right as far as the subject we are discussing here tonight is concerned. And I'm sure, friends, when you check on the previous discussions we have had, we have made every effort to bring specialists in the subject area to come and speak to you. And this is exactly what we are doing. We will continue to do that. And for you to understand the credentials our panelists have, it's very important for them to self-introduce. I'll give them 30 seconds each, and then from there we are good to go. I will start with, I'll end with the ladies. They normally say honor ladies, but let me start with Dr. Papu over there, and then Dr. Matema, and then Professor Edith. You may be the last one in that row. 30 seconds each, but not more than a minute. I'll appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm Jongimbi Papu. I'm currently serving in the Cape Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm situated in Port Elizabeth. I'm married. I've been married now for almost 35 years with 2 sons. My interest and focus is in the area of missiology, focusing on African traditional religion with keen interest on the role of ancestors. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the program, Doctor.
Zacchaeus Matema. I'm taller now than I was more than 2,000 years ago.
I was going to ask you whether you are still very short or...
I've been and married to Nongeva and 3 children, Kengane, Senzo, and Sendiso. I have interest in what you have introduced here, that is to help our people to find themselves again after receiving the good news, to decolonize what came with the culture of those who brought the good news. Thank you.
Powerful. Welcome, Doctor, to the program. You have already started causing fireworks there, but anyway, we'll move with the discussion. Professor?
Professor Edith, please unmute yourself.
My name is Edith Paswana. I'm the associate professor at the University of South Africa, specifically at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. And my research interests are in African development, in public policy, in governance, specifically looking at this from a decolonial epistemic thought. I'm a mother to a young adult girl called Marcela Elo, and I'm a widow. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for all your intros. Your intros actually are the ones that made me wear my second pair of eyes today, because I was like, I need to understand the professors and doctors properly. My very first question would be for you, Professor Edith. You know, I've been practicing, I was saying to Dr. Papu just now, I was practicing to say the word decoloniality all night. Yeah, I'm not used to it. But before we even go into that one, I want us to first speak about coloniality, so that when we move forward, we can have a base to start from. From your point of view, how would you describe or explain coloniality? And then also, as you go further, how does it differ then from colonialism? Dr. Edith?
Okay. Well, coloniality has to do with those invisible power structures that continue to sustain colonial relations of power beyond the strict limits of direct colonialism, which means that colonial relations of power left profound markers in terms of authority, in terms of knowledge, in terms of power. And this is why when we describe coloniality, you have to describe it at three levels, or three concepts are used to describe it, meaning coloniality of power, coloniality of knowledge, and coloniality of being. And I'm going to quickly explain what each one of them means here. When we speak of coloniality of power, this one deals with how the global political is constituted and constructed into asymmetrical global power structures. What does that mean? It means that somehow the way power is structured in the world, you have relations of power between Euro-American world and global South, which are very asymmetrical. They are not on the equal level, equal plane. And that has to do with global politics, economy, and all of those things. And this is why it was even possible to have the imposition of slavery, of colonialism, of imperialism, apartheid in these parts of the world. And then that was part of the broader agenda of coloniality. And when we speak of coloniality of knowledge, then here we are dealing with the politics of knowledge production. Who generates what knowledge, for what purpose, and which knowledge is legitimate? So that is coloniality of knowledge. And then coloniality of being has to do, it has to do with the questioning of the humanities of others. Other people, humanity is being questioned, whether they are real human beings or are they something else. And here it resulted in a process where the humanity of Africans was commodified, objectified, and thingified. And that's why it was possible to take Africans out and export them into other parts of the world. And that alone, coloniality of being,
right?
It is because it continues. It has to do with the trauma which people experience, particularly as they meet or they encounter superior other. People just feel they are fearful to meet someone who's not like them. And therefore, that has to do with coloniality of power. And I think I want to delve into your question around what is the difference between coloniality and colonialism? Yes. When we speak of colonialism then becomes this political and economical relation whereby the sovereignty of a nation or a people rests on another territory. So, which is ruling from a far distance. So here, in our continent, it culminated in the invasion, the conquest, dispossession, the exportation of human and also natural resources, and that one ended at some point. And then we talked about decolonization or post-colonial society because it was seen as a bad thing to the world. Thank you.
Sure, you see why I had to wear my glasses, because I'm in class today. Yeah. Pastor Ngwaru.
Yeah, I've got a bit of follow-up questions to ask to our professor there. Professor Edith, you spoke about power structures. You are talking of knowledge, and you are talking of being, coloniality, and what have you. Now, let's look at power. Are you talking of us being playing second fiddle at United Nations level? What global structures are you talking? Are these institutions, or are we powerless in our own countries? We fought wars of independence, now we are free people. Are we still feeling weak even though we are independent? What are we talking when you say coloniality of power? Can you expound on that, please?
Well, you will recognize that the way the modern world has been structured,
yes,
the power is constituted as asymmetrical. There are nations that are powerful and were powerful even to invade other nations, even to conquer other nations.
Yes.
And that situation, even beyond colonialism, has not changed in terms of how we play in the global power structures, where Africans are always at the periphery, but you do have the core countries. You have the G8 as the core, and other countries will be at the periphery of these nations.
And then, of course, Sane, you allow me, I want to finish my questions on knowledge and being and whatever.
No,
maybe
I allow you for a moment, so I'll let you go on for a bit before I interrupt you. You know the game.
Okay, no, thanks, my daughter. Doctor, let's look at Zimbabwe. Let's look at Zimbabwe, maybe nearly 40 years of independence. South Africa, is it 24, 25? I don't know, thereabout. Ghana has been there since 1958 when I was born. That's when they got the independence. What is making difficult to create our own African knowledge? Is it the power base that you are talking of? What is holding us from generating knowledge as independent Africans?
Professor,
Doctor, did you hear me?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm asking Dr. Edith. I'm still with Dr. Edith.
Okay. I thought you were talking to my colleagues. Okay.
No, sorry about that. Sorry about that.
No.
Did you hear the question?
You can rephrase, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, before you go on, I'm going to ask, since we're live, I'll just have to do this live. Our participants, please just check sure that your phones are not on vibrate. Just put them on mute, so that at least we don't have that feedback coming in there. All right, Pastor Ngwaru, you can just rephrase. Pastor Ngwaru, I'm giving you 30 seconds to rephrase so we can move to the next part.
Okay, no, thanks, Annie. Prof. Paswane, I'm particularly interested in knowledge generation. What is the world out there blocking us from creating knowledge? What is stopping us from creating knowledge when we have been independent since 1958?
Well, absolutely. We can't really say they are stopping anyone from creating knowledge, but because the way coloniality operates, it operates on technologies of subjectification, and also you need platforms for publication to be able to publish. So we were not part of many of the scientific committees. We just came in a few years after colonialism. So what happens now is that sometimes, because there is a knowledge that is superior, that is regarded, the Western ways of knowing becomes the superior logic of knowledge, and whatever people bring on the table there are ways or in where you are going to be judged or approved, peer review mechanism and all of that will make it impossible for certain people or certain types of knowledge to be considered valid knowledges. But this landscape has been changing with the decolonial movement, with Africanization, and when African journals started to be on the platform. People are changing this landscape, but there is still resistance for certain types of publications and journals to consider what we consider as knowledge as Africans to be on the platform of the scientific knowledge.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Papu?
I just wanted to bring the element of Christianity in the debate as well, because unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, Christianity also crisscrossed with colonialism. The very people that were coming from Europe and elsewhere were also Christian. They were Christians, even though they may not have been missionaries, but the missionaries were also in the same color. So the colonialism and Christianization and missionarization just went hand in glove. So that to the recipients of the gospel and those whose land was confiscated and taken, there was no difference between the missionary and the mercenary. They were all in the same boat. In fact, there's also some arguments that the missionaries would open the way for the mercenaries, for those who wanted to do business. And so there's a very ugly mixture of land expropriation, of land taking, and as well as trying to win the soul of Africans. So it creates a problem to some that maybe the whole idea of missionarization was also such that so that we can have our land taken. You know of the popular statement by Kenyatta that they gave us the Bible while our eyes were closed. They took the land. So there's all of that also is part of the situation we're in. So we cannot exclude Christianity also because it was also used in those levels of power, knowledge, and being to a great extent.
Okay.
Right.
May I come in too?
Yes, please, Dr. Matema.
In the driving forces behind colonialism that leads to coloniality. Behind this was the 3 G's, they call them. The 3 G's was representing God. And the second G is glory. Glory for the nation that was colonizing. And the third G is gold. That is the wealth that is there in the colony. These are driving forces, and they're coming together like this. Unfortunately, the colonized took it in its totality instead of digging deeper to see what's the difference here between the cultures of these people and the things that they are preaching. So the people just embrace everything, and now they are learning too late that, hey, that's the problem. But we can work towards correcting it now.
Okay, no, thank you.
That's why we're going to have this discussion. Now that you have spoken, while I'm still on you, Dr. Matema, the question that I would have for you, which I'll follow up depending on the answer that you give, is what is African spirituality?
I hear people talking about African spirituality. They are referring to, as I understand them, to the ways Africans express themselves after they hear about the good news, the way they express themselves. When they rise up and say, okay, we have this God now, this is how I'm going to relate to him, this is how I'm going to worship him, in an African way as they have been designed. But if you want my answer, there is no such a thing as African spirituality. Spirituality is one. Spirituality simply means living in union with God, life in union with God. So whether you're African or European or Asian, spirituality is the thing. If you put African, that means you are particularizing and referring to the way Africans express themselves.
I'm glad you have given your answer as well, because my next question would have been, is there a spiritual background to the school of thought? But you have answered to say you're spiritual, full stop. The African part doesn't really, count. I don't know, Pastor Papo, Edith, if you want to just add to what Dr. Matema just said.
Yeah. Maybe yes, I agree with him. But what he said towards the end is probably what we need to unpack. That how do Africans express their spirituality? The Asians, the Americans, the Europeans, but how do Africans express their spirituality? And I would argue that the African traditional religion seeks to express that form of African spirituality, which is steeped also in the African worldview. So how they view God, how they approach God, how they worship God. And I'm not referring to post missionary or post colonial. Even before, you would remember that Africans were worshiping God before missionaries came. Missionaries did not bring God; they brought a concept of God, a revelation, an understanding, a particular understanding of God, and that's why they could literally find expressions in the local languages, Utik or Ubanban, using the language of the area to say that there was this knowledge as well. So African spirituality then will play in that area where how do you look at God? How do you view nature? How do you view death? How do you view human beings, men? And so African spirituality will have different elements. For example, African spirituality as opposed to Western spirituality is very spiritual, very spiritualistic. It is very religious, as opposed to the material view or spirituality of the West. African spirituality takes spiritism, spirits seriously, and beings that are not touchable seriously, and demons and all of that later on to be known as demons. But in other worldviews, you reason from nature to cause and rationality, and hence you discover that with the arrival of missionaries and their evangelization, they also influenced by their own culture, even in the transmission of the Bible, to a point where in their interlocution, in their preaching of the gospel, they sort of sidelined the presence and the malevolent and the benevolent, if you please, the malevolent of spirits, such that now those who became Christians still had to do with the spirits, which to the West, those were superstitions. And to that extent, you had African independent churches sprouting to deal with those areas that the white missionaries thought they were just a bunch of superstitions. So as Mbiti says somewhere, that Africans are notoriously religious. So our African spirituality then at the center, depending where you are in the continent, you have ancestors, they are functionaries, they are diviners, they are all these, they are sangomas. That's all within the context of African spirituality.
Yeah. Sorry, if I can come in there, Sane.
Yeah.
I want to make a follow-up to Dr. Papu and maybe Dr. Matema, and you two gentlemen can assist. I want us to avoid speaking in symbols. I want us to be as painfully open and truthful to this discussion. When we speak about African spirituality, does it accommodate the person of Jesus, or it accommodates ancestral worship, or it combines the two? Let's be very clear on that one. I've listened to some people talk about decoloniality of Christianity, and then speaking of, let's go to our shrines. And when you go to traditional shrines, are we going there with Jesus, or are we going there to meet some other spirit? Let's unpack this. What is spirit about spiritual African spirituality? Where does Jesus come in? Where do our ancestral spirits come in?
I think let's start with Dr. Matema. Take us back to class, and then Pastor Papu comes in.
Dr. Papu mentioned something about worldview. We have to always keep this in mind. there is what is known as African traditional worldview.
Yes.
When you talk to someone, whether African or not, the person sifts things through that worldview that he has cherished, that he has embraced. So even though the Africans heard about Jesus, they tried to put that Jesus through the way they view life.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
In a way, those who cherished that kind of fixation did not go deep enough to be converted. And as a result, they have this dual loyalty. Sometimes they are within the church. When crises come, they are out there with the Ngangas and other political power people. So if we as Africans could address this worldview issue so that when you are converted to be a Christian and accept Jesus Christ, you accept him as he is, as revealed in the Bible, instead of through the eyes of your worldview.
Sure. Dr. Papa?
Okay.
African spirituality is not the legacy of colonialism. It was there before the missionaries came. When the missionaries came and they found Africans worshiping. Now, what happened is they introduced God, the concept of God who sent his son to die for us on Calvary, the God who created. They knew that God created. So one of the reasons why it was not difficult for Africans to embrace God, it was something familiar. There's something that we're familiar with, that they understood even from their pre-Christian worldview or understanding. But just to zero in, for example, your missionaries had a dualistic understanding of the nature of man. They believe that when you die, you become a saint in heaven. And so when they came, they found that the Africans believe that when you die, you become an ancestor. In most areas of you become an ancestor. But they said, no, there are no ancestors. Don't worry about ancestors. But the Africans were confused, but we have your saints also. So both the Africans and the missionaries, from Adventist perspective, both of them were not representing the Bible, because the missionaries had their saints in heaven and the Africans had their ancestors. What happened when the African Christianity started to blossom? So that the ancestors now, for the Christians, became saints in a way. They moved from the ancestral world and now they're somewhere in heaven because they are Christians as well. But the Adventist perspective, for both the saints and the ancestors, we believe in the monistic view of man. That man does not have a spirit. He's the spirit. He's the soul. That when he dies, all of him perishes, dies until resurrection. Such that when we talk about Christ, we do not talk about Christ within the context of the aunt and the uncle and the father and the others who are in the mediation. It is Christ only who brings us to Christ. So that's what Christianity brings from the Adventist perspective. That's the message.
Right. While we're still there, because I want us to move after we've kind of digested this, we say it has been a hot topic on social media. Yeah. What are the things that then you would advise people who are wanting to investigate or learn more about African spirituality? What are the things that you would advise them to look out for, or things that they need to bear in mind as they consider the issue of African spirituality? I get what Dr. Matema said to say there's just spirituality, but because we refer to it as that, what can they look out for as they delve into this topic? What are the danger zones, that you could advise if they want to read more or learn more about this? I'll start with Dr. Papu on that one.
What we need to understand is there is a text that Christians accept as authoritative, and that's the Bible. Unfortunately, the Bible is read and interpreted. And it is that interpretation of the Bible that comes as a form of knowledge that needs some form of decolonization. Decoloniality plays a very important role in the deconstructing of the very interpretation of the Bible. So what we need to do, and what actually Africans did, and what some missionaries did, was the interpretation of the Bible into the local language, making the Bible accessible to the indigenous. So when the indigenous read the Bible, they said, but we read in the Bible that you must be baptized in water. Why are we baptized in a cup? And then they went to the river. They left the church, they went to the river. We read in the Bible that you must be prayed for. If you are sick, demons will be cast out. Why are you not casting out demons? So you see now, it was a form of, some form of decoloniality taking place, challenging the power structures and the knowledge formation and production by actually appealing and using the Bible as the authoritative text, the very Bible that the missionaries were using. In other words, they were using the text to critique the message that was coming from the missionaries. As a result, we had the sprawling of the African independent churches that actually have become even more in number than your mainline churches, because they were able to use. Now, that's a process. I can't say it's a finished product. That's a process. They were able to use the Bible to critique the very knowledge and understanding of God that was presented to them by the missionaries. That if you worship God, you must stand still and not move. And so what they were doing, they were able to separate the gospel from the culture, from the European culture.
Okay.
I'm glad, Pastor, that you mentioned that. Can I just interject? Yeah, I think I'm glad that Pastor Papu actually gets in there, because I think what he has just summed now really talks to decoloniality, because decoloniality is a redemptive and liberatory epistemology. That's what decoloniality is all about. And the bigger part of decoloniality is to expose the darker side of modernity and to counter those persisting privilege of modernity. And this is why when he says to us, people were going back to the Bible and seeing certain things that the Bible say, but we were not doing it. And that on its own is a liberatory epistemology, because that's what decoloniality teaches you. And these people were able to see this because the language that they were reading were the language that was close to them. They indigenized the Bible to make them be able to see what it is for. So part of decoloniality is also to label and say things the way they are without concealing certain things for the purpose of particular agendas.
Thank you with that. Sane, let me come in there. And I'm glad, Professor, you have picked that one up. Let me give you real life scenarios here. I am holding a book with white pictures, white people, white kids. It's a children's book, and the pictures are white. And this person says to me, Pastor, throw that book away. It has white people. Don't you know we are now decolonizing ourselves? We don't want books that have got white pictures. We don't want presidents of offices who are white people. Then you are being fed with this idea of being white is wrong on the African continent. We cannot stomach whiteness. It must just go back to England, go back to Washington. Is this what decoloniality is all about? We must not don't see.
Let us answer his question first.
Thank you, Dr. Matema. Somebody's on my side today.
We must
maybe if you want to add, yes, thank you.
Ask a question about when we go about the process of decolonizing, what should we be careful about? What are the principles? Let us answer that question directly and say there are two dangers. One is accepting those who brought the gospel, everything that they brought, including their culture. Drinking. Yes. Many of our people drank that poison, that white superior, black inferior. That is the poison we must tell our people to vomit immediately. We need to make sure that we decolonize by making people vomit that poison. The other extreme that we must avoid, Sane,
Yes.
is that of what they label today as Afrocentrism.
Right.
Going back to African traditions and practices, even those that are so cruel, including what the professor mentioned yesterday, like FGM. Those are things that were practiced by our people. They meant something big, which when we receive Christ, we can go back to our people and say, look, this was supposed to meet this need. Now you have got one who created you. You can meet the same need this way, in a different way.
Right. Now, let's go back to Pastor Ngwaru's question, because I know he's really itching for it on behalf of other people as well.
Yes.
I'm going to direct it to yes, Pastor Ngwaru?
Yeah, I want to put Professor Paswano on the spot on this one.
Okay.
Yes, we have narratives now that are beginning to tell us that anything white is bad. If we pick an Adventist hymnal which has got songs like A Wonderful Savior and what, they'll ask who wrote these songs. These songs were not written by Africans, so throw away that hymnal. We don't need it in Africa. You had started building on what is decoloniality, and can you help me and help those who are listening? What do we really mean by decolonial? Are we replacing, reversing everything, and what are we doing?
Well, part of what the decolonial epistemic thought teaches is first to avoid what we call provincialization, to provincialize the world. The world is big, the world is universal, the world is pluriversal, the world is diverse. Yes. And part of what coloniality with its colonialism has done in the past was actually to peripheralize and marginalize other portions of the world. And what decoloniality is not prepared to do is actually to repeat the dehumanization, the inhumanity that came with colonialism and coloniality, and be able to take it further. Right. Part of decolonizing is not to reverse. What decoloniality teaches is to give a world a new face of humanity, which was never there before. And part of the scholars who are following this scholarship is who have been on the decolonial path. Even Steve Biko, some of them quote Steve Biko, Frantz Fanon on this continent, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Most of these scholars who actually were at the core of decolonial projects, because we are beginning to excavate some of the works, and we are able to see whether they are decolonial or not. And part of that is that whether all cultures, for instance, they have bad and good things. All people, all races, they have bad and good. There are so many things, even in Africa, which are not good.
Right.
And they are part of our culture. They are part of our whole makeup and identity. And we can name, the Dr. Matema has already said, talked about the female genital mutilation. We have so many of these practices within us that are not advancing humanity. In fact, they are harming humanity. So when you decolonize, you go to all these cultures, whether it's Asian, whether it's Western, whether it's Africa. When you decolonize, you look at what is it that is going to advance humanity beyond this. And part of the decolonizing process is to take each one of the good things that are advancing humanity into the table. And this is why what we call universalism now, Pastor, is not universalism, because it is founded on the basis of one culture, which is Western. So a proper and true universalism will come when we pick things from all these cultures of the world into one thing, and then we create a new one culture that will advance humanity.
Sure.
That, Pastor, that was key, universalism. Your question has not been answered about these symbols or illustrations that people use.
Yeah.
People go to extremes when they see a picture of a person who does not come from their own ethnic group or something like that.
Yeah.
That is an extremism that we must avoid. Let us take that person who wrote that book. He was talking about human beings, and the human being he knew was someone like him. And on the receiving end, when you receive that, you must sift and say, this is him, this is his culture. But there is something that he told me, like the Bereans of the Bible. The Bereans took the Bible and Paul preached, and they went to check, is this what this revealed book of God is saying?
Yeah.
But our people are reacting and throwing away anything that has got pictures that don't look like them. That's going too far. We should avoid that. If I were making a story myself, I could write a book and with all these flat nose of Matema and the kinky hair, and I said, you shouldn't reject it. It's because I look different from you. I hope I'm making that must be addressed, because I pick it up and it's very disturbing. Around here in Zimbabwe, there in South Africa, well, it's time now to preach that Jesus is black like us. Nonsense.
That's Dr. Matema for you.
Dr.
I want us to link this with what Prof said, and that is to have a book for the children with 50 children, all of them white on the cover, is not a true representation of reality.
Yeah.
In this world, we don't only have white children.
Yeah.
So a person who puts only white children on a cover is also exhibiting some serious weakness.
Right.
So we must be able to address this. Remember, we're talking about the production of knowledge as well. When your child doesn't see his image, he's a child, it's a formative period. He doesn't see his image in all the children in the illustration. Something forms in his mind that there's something wrong with him. It comes back to the level of being. That for me now to be a human being, I must be white, because I don't see any black child in all these pictures. And all the names are European names, which means I must change my name, Nokuzola, and be called Mary, because all the children will go to heaven are Mary and Eunice. There's no Nokuzola, and all of them are white. And that has also played out in the sense where children at some point would want to play with white dolls and not black dolls. Have a problem with that. So we need to be able to look at those issues that were raised earlier on of knowledge. We need to be producing ourselves books that will also affirm who we are, but also create a situation where our children will know that there are others. They mustn't think that the world is formed only of black children. So we are not going to replace a book of white kids with a book full of black children, because there's no world like that.
It's very important. Let me just illustrate by one thing that I saw when I was in Michigan one day. Professor Betances was, you could say, South Africa colored. The parents, one parent was white or Caucasian, another parent was like Matema. And this child in school was always carrying the picture of one of the parents. He refused to carry the picture of a black parent, but always carrying a picture of the white parent. Say, this is my parent. But the other picture, the child did not want to carry. That child was damaged. That is satanic. So it's time to do things to reverse. I hope what Papa said, because we have to correct these things. That
thanks a lot.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Doc. Dr. Papu, let's look at this thing here. What is God's mission on the earth as far as the human race is concerned? We have blacks, we have whites, we have Asians, we have all colors, and we now have this thing called decoloniality. How does mission and decoloniality marry? The Bible says, "Go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations." I am black. Do I have mission to white people? Do I have mission to Asians? Or I've got mission to black people? On how does decoloniality and the Great Commission work together?
If you bring God into the picture, then we all become his children, we all become his creatures. God's mission is, after the fall, God created all of us. There is no color that is accidental. God created all of us. The tapestry, if you look at the creation, you've got white roses, red roses. God created all of us. And our identity is in the fact that we are created in his image. With the fall, God committed himself to saving all humanity. He sends his son to die for everyone. And then we see him driving the whole project of evangelism. It's unfortunate that human beings ran with this and made it their own project. The goal of God's mission is to restore humanity into his own image. When Christ was here, he was basically saying, this is what it means to be a human being. That is why it is to focus on the color of Jesus. It really distorts the whole mission. When you put a white Jesus, you are actually creating a wrong concept. Actually, if you look at the genealogy of Jesus Christ, it goes to, at some point, it goes to Abraham, it goes to son of Adam, it goes all the way to son of God, it goes all the way to being God himself, so that when the Bible says he came to save his people means all. Actually, if you see in the early Testament, early church, there was a problem between Jews and Gentiles, but it was God who brought education to Peter and said, go to Cornelius, who was a white person, by the way. Cornelius was a white person who was actually viewed as a Gentile. And Peter says, there's no way I'm going to a Gentile. And God corrected him. He says, you cannot call a person I've created a Gentile. Right there, you saw that there are no boundaries. The message must go to everyone. On the day of Pentecost, for example, the Holy Spirit speaks in all the languages. That means there is no holy language. There is no holy culture.
Amen.
Egyptian, Ethiopian, Arabic, Asian. God could have just used his language, one, and made everybody to understand. But he didn't do that. He spoke in their languages to say, your language is just as important as another language. There is no holy language. There is no holy culture. So God embraced those languages. That is why we see the transmission of the Bible into those local languages. So basically, if you look at all of that, here's one thing that's very, very important, which the missionaries missed. When Peter went to Cornelius, bringing God, he thought, but he found that God was already there. That even before was baptized, before he was baptized, he had already received the Holy Spirit. God had approved. God actually said, I accept him. Now, Peter leaves Cornelius. He goes back home. On his way, he says, now I know. And this is something missionaries have forgotten. They missed. That when God brought missionaries to Africa, not them bringing God, he was also bringing them so that as they go back, they can say, now I know. So what they should have done when they come to Africa was to sit down and look at God's footprints. What was God doing in Africa while we were in Europe? They must they thought God in Africa, that God was coming for the first time in Africa, when it was God who brought them so that they can see what God is doing in the African community. So they will share their view of God and understand something from the Africans about their view of God. And that would actually help them to understand that God is the God of communality. You see, they, within their individualistic culture, they came to a communal environment. So had they sat down, they would have understood that, no, God is not just an individualistic God. He's also a communal God. How do they know that? Because now they've interacted with a culture that is communal. Cultures that exist in isolation are static. So the reason why cultures intermix, it is so that they can be able to enrich. So what we see then is that the white missionaries make this their project, so that now what they were doing was they were selling a God who looks like them. They created God in their own image. What we should not do is to create God in our own image and then say they brought a white God, we are going to bring a black God. Once we do that, or they brought a white Jesus, we are going to bring a black Jesus. Now here is the color of Jesus, and then I'm going to keep quiet. The color of Jesus are the works of Jesus. Jesus says, I was hungry, I was naked. The character, not the color. When I help a young man who's hungry and I'm black, and I help him and give him food, he looks at me and I say to him, Jesus loves us. I talk to him about our Father. He might look at me and say, I think God must look like you. You must be his son. When a white man comes and gives this boy also bread, he will look at him and says, I think God is also like you. When a green man comes and gives him and helps him, I think God also looks like you. He says, all of you who have helped me, you look like your God. The God you are talking to me about must be represented in all of you. It is the character. And what they missed, that it is the character of God that must be presented to human beings so that they can emulate and want to be restored into that. Not so much trying to confine God into iconography.
Sure. You know, Dr.
Actually provincializing God.
Yes.
No, I was just adding and saying that is actually provincializing God. Confining him to a very small part of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Papu, if I'm hearing you correctly, so I want to, I'm a lay person here. We are saying that if we are going to say, let's get rid of the white picture of Jesus and then have a black picture of Jesus, then we are not different. We should not be doing that. It's about the character of Christ. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. Just an illustration. If I go into a church as a black person who was oppressed and I see a big white Jesus, I might say, I'm going to be oppressed here. Even the Jesus who's here is like the person who was oppressing me. So they hear that, then they put a black Jesus. And a guy from Malawi, a guy from Ethiopia, whose wife was killed in the when they were chasing the what do you call the citizens of other countries, foreign nationals. So he ran away from his country because the black people that were running his country were killing his village. So he ran away. He comes to South Africa. He tries some business. And here we also ban him and ban his children. And he comes to church. He sees a black Jesus. He might say, hey, I'm also going to be killed here. Because in his mind, it was the black person that was actually responsible for his misery. So we have to be very careful because there is no color that is good news to everyone. So you can't just say black color to a child whose father was black and that child was abused by that father. He goes to church, he sees a black father also in church. He says, I'm going to be abused also here. So you have to be very careful how we depict Christ. We can only depict Christ through our actions, through our character.
Yeah. Nice. Yes, Professor Edith, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think from what I'm hearing, in fact, the biggest mistake was representation of God, of Jesus in picture form. I think African spirituality or those cultures that never actually portrayed and draw God on any platform were safe because God became this imaginary being in their head. So coloniality uses symbols, memory, representations, and this is why, and because they know that these symbols are very, very key in terms of reinforcement of particular messages. So when you put the white Jesus on your wall, you are reinforcing, and you can see this. It happens in adverts everywhere. In the way advertisements are taking, the way the media portrays African women as if they are only fair-skinned women on this continent. And when people visit here, they find different colors they were like. what we see on TV is not what we see when we go to the world. And I think that the whole notion of symbols, of representation, and we shouldn't have done it with God, actually, from what I see, I hear from what Dr. Papu is saying.
I need help. Sorry, I need help here. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of some viewers out there, maybe from the three of you. Let's be very clear here. There are people who are attacking the whiteness of Jesus. Are they attacking the picture that represents Jesus Christ, or are they attacking the picture and even Jesus Christ himself? Because those who are advancing the gospel of we don't want a white Jesus, they are not very clear in terms of, is it the works of Jesus they don't want? Is it the Son of God who is called Jesus they don't want? Or is just the whole package, the picture, the symbol, and even you throw away the water and the baby? Can you help our viewers differentiate here the difference between the picture and the person? Is there something wrong with Jesus? Is there something wrong with the picture? What I'm beginning to hear from you is you are addressing the picture that represents Jesus. But some people who push this narrative don't seem to make a distinction between the picture and Jesus. So at the end of the day, when you go to, some of us who are into mission and evangelism and whatever, we are having a hard time now having people to accept Jesus because they say, I don't want your white Jesus. You can go away, say, I have nothing to do with your white Jesus. And where are they picking it from? They are picking it from us pastors who are saying that Jesus Christ, that white Jesus, I don't want. They may not be wrong in saying that, but they are not definitive. What are we saying? Please, can you help our viewers on this?
Okay, before we respond, because I'm looking at the time, we have about 15 minutes left. I think Dr. Papu tried to kind of cover a bit about that. But Pastor Ngwaru, if you want to go a bit deeper, I'll just give a minute from Dr. Papu and Dr. Matema to just answer you for once and for all on this.
I'll appreciate that.
We can move on to the last section of our segment. But I think he tried to exhaust. Dr. Matema, do you want to attempt that question first?
Yes, indeed. I'll be very blunt in answering this one. Those who talk in terms of white Jesus and black Jesus, I would say that's being very superficial. It's refusing to go deeper to the essence of what is supposed to be communicated. And people can, because of certain advantages that go with the certain colors, people can, they've done it in history. We are here, maybe all of us here are products of colonialism. We are here. The people who colonize us put negative meaning on our color or an ethnicity because of economic advantages that you could attain to if you were like them.
Yeah.
So they end up blaming biology just as an excuse for keep on monopolizing advantages of life. We can blame gender if we tell women don't think clearly, women are troublesome. We can blame gender as an excuse to maintain our our advantage. So if people talk about color or gender, what is because they should penetrate deeper and get to the bottom of this whole thing. Let me just use Papu's assertion that character is what matters. It's not color, it's character. In our tradition, we have a term, our Nguni language, Ubuntu. You have heard about Ubuntu.
Yes.
You can be green in color, you can be yellow in color, you can be black, but well, ungela Ubuntu. If you don't have that humanness, by the way, it's not translatable. For the Ngunis, it's too deep. But it simply means you have to display that humanness that is making life good for other people who are also human beings.
Right.
Thank you.
There is, if someone starts talking about black, white Jesus, I don't think I want to continue the discussion with that person because it's going the wrong direction already. It's starting from a wrong premise, and the conclusion will be wrong too.
Right.
Jesus is God, and who is God? Jesus has revealed him. This is what it means to be God. This is what I mean. Character is what matters.
Amen.
Right.
Amen. Thank
Dr.
you.
Papa, final thoughts on that so we can move on from it?
Okay. Let me be honest here that you can reject Jesus Christ. He's rejectable. You can reject him. People have rejected him. The Jews rejected him. He spoke their language. They killed him. They put him on the cross. Judas Iscariot stayed with him for 3 years. He rejected him. Peter almost denied him, but he came back later on. Demas walked with Paul. He rejected. He left. He apostatized and he left. You can reject Jesus Christ. But the argument is to reject him on the basis of color that is superficial. That shows lack of serious knowledge. We're not saying people should not reject him, but to just say because he was white, to reject Jesus Christ because you say Christianity is a white man's religion, it shows lack of history, understanding of history. Christianity is closer to Africans than it is to Europeans. The first convert in the book of Acts was not a Gentile white person. It was a black Jew from Africa who was not even regarded as a Gentile, coming to worship from Jerusalem. But the convert of the white person created a havoc in the early Testament because he was a Gentile. But the convert of Ethiopian was not an issue because he was coming from worship in Jerusalem and going down, reading the book of Isaiah. Your earliest theologians and scholars and bishops, the majority of them were black Africans. By the way, there was an Ethiopic Bible in Ethiopia before there was the European Bible. This whole thing of iconography is a recent manifestation, and there is no scholar who even argues on those bases. Even those who doubt the whole mystoricity of Jesus Christ, it is not because of the color. The color, if you use the color for your argumentation, it is a very, very superficial approach. You can reject him on other grounds, but color, there's no scholar of note anywhere who argues for a white Jesus, except the iconography you see, which those symbols which are driving that narrative. So I think that's the point that we want to raise.
Okay, so I'm going to start winding it down now. I've got one last question for all three of you. In seeking in seeking to be relevant, in seeking to contextualize the gospel and so forth, how can I do this without harming the mission? Because I mean, sitting here, all of us belong to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We're Adventists. So in seeking to be relevant, in seeking to understand things contextually, how can I do this without harming the mission of the church? I don't know if that's a clear way of putting it. Yes. How can I be relevant without harming the mission of the church? I'll start with Dr. Papu, then I'll come round, so then we'll conclude the program.
Okay, I'll just take 1 minute. For me, my question is, after decoloniality, then what? Decoloniality is a project, something we have to do. It's a means to an end. There must be an end that we have in mind, that we want to achieve this. We cannot just enjoy being in the process of decoloniality and make that forever perpetual undertaking. Yes, the process it's not an event, it's going to, but we must have an end in mind. In the context of the church and mission, we want to spread the gospel. When we engage in decoloniality, it is because we are trying to clear the ground so that the message can be received clearly. We are trying to remove the fake aspects of the gospel when we engage in decoloniality. And the end is for the character of Christ and the character of God to be revealed and to be seen.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Professor Edith?
Well, I think there is nothing much to subtract from what the pastor has said, but what I want to emphasize from the position where I'm sitting is actually for Africans to understand and who they truly are, because also as we move towards this this ideal that Pastor Papu is talking about, we shouldn't actually be forgetting who we are as African. And I
Right.
think one of the mistakes that has happened all along in the past is this denigration of Africans and undermining of African humanity and African people or people of African descent wherever they are in the world. So and this has created a bifurcation of who is human, who is non-human. And at the same time, you also realize that people now feel that they are more African because of their skin color. They are more African because of the clothes they wear. They are more African because of the names they bear. And that is not about being African. Being African is a consciousness. It's about consciousness. And it goes back to where the pastor was talking about the character of Jesus is what we should be looking for. So even with us, being African for us should be about this consciousness where it is not enough just to dress like an African or with our colored clothes, where it's not enough to speak an African language, where it's not enough to bear a name, but be conscious enough, your self-worth, your confidence, your mindset, that's what makes you an African. And therefore, as we go forward as Africans within the church mission, we also need not to be at the back seat of other nations or at the back seat of other cultures or at the back seat of other races. So we need to stand up firm and self-determine as Africans, and that we are also legitimate. Africa is a legitimate site of knowledge production. Africans are also legitimate children of God. So all of these should be telling us that we cannot be in the periphery in the gospel. We cannot be in the periphery in global power structures. Africans need to stand up and be firm and know who they are and claim this victory together with other races. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Mateva?
I am so tickled, tempted to speak too much, but anyway, let me just zero it down on this point that was made by one of the famous scholars in Africa, John Beatty, who said mission Christianity did not penetrate deep enough into African religiosity. I want to answer specifically the question you have asked, Sami.
Yeah.
How do we go about evangelizing safely without derailing the mission?
Yes.
I've argued elsewhere in my publications that the mission program that does not penetrate deep into African religiosity, that mission is not complete.
Right.
We are here to take the mission a step higher, a step further, by making sure that even the people we are engaged with in giving them this God, we make sure that they discover their identity, their true identity as human beings. And as I understand the Bible, the New Testament, the church is supposed to be a community of people who are renewed and always renewing.
Right.
That's the program of the church. So when you are engaging with people, you must tell yourself that I must contribute something that is going to make this other human being a better person. So when you operate from that premise, you are going to look for conceptual bridges to reach this human being. And you reach them by the help of the Holy Spirit, of course. But you have to be also wise enough to make sure that you don't spoil things that make people close their minds and they don't hear anymore. Avoid engaging in the dialogue of the deaf.
Right. I think we're going to come to a close now. You know, there's just so many comments. I've been trying to pick one lucky viewer to see at least engage at least one or two of them. Mara, I don't even know where to start. I think this one, let me start with this question. There's a question here. I think I'll address it I'll start with Professor Edith. Then at least I'll just take two questions at least so that at least we can engage with our audience. the question here is, why should our adult lessons, I'm assuming this is the Sabbath school lessons, the children's lessons and PowerPoint come from the West? So let's start with Professor Edith. How would you answer this person who's asking, why do our lessons come from the West?
I think earlier on when we started, I talked about these categories of power in the global power structures, and how this is sustained over time because of coloniality, and who owns the publication, the publishing ministries and all of this. And you also realize that this is sometimes it's about who owns, and remember, with the whole notion of coloniality, there was also a project of capitalism. So from this end, then you also begin to understand. But I believe that the church is moving to where everyone, every nation or everyone will be able to write for that specific publication and be able to submit but I don't want to downplay the power play of publication, because it happens across, I also believe it happens in the church as well, because it happened across the whole global line where certain people are, or certain territories are seen as legitimate sites of knowledge. So that is also something that in the process has to be decolonized.
Right.
Sorry, Sane, I need to quickly intervene on that one. I think since I represent that kind of department, I may need to help in that one, even though I'm a host.
That's fine.
Okay.
The person who asked about Sabbath school study guides coming from America, it just happens that our head office is in Washington, in America, but we have a world program for contributors to our lessons. They come from around the world. And like Dr. or Professor Edith is saying, we would appreciate if we can have more writers of Sabbath school lessons also coming from Africa, as it were. That would appreciate that. But we have had cases where we have had lessons coming from Asia, coming from there, and all these people contributing together.
Right. You, Bazalone, the questions are a lot. I think I will just have to end it here. Then if ever there's a time that we can come back, we'll do that. But I appreciate everybody who took time to tune in. Look, this was a discussion. It's not comprehensive. Maybe you've got another school of thought. We are trying our best to discuss a complicated issue. But if you feel that you want to contribute, please keep on commenting, and then we'll try and engage with you after this. Now, as we close, 30 seconds. Pastor Pap, your final thoughts on everything.
No, all right. For me, the greatest challenge, life is short. The project of decoloniality mustn't be confined to Zoom and lecture halls. It must go where the rubber meets the road. We need to go and exercise and show what it means to be an African. In the African village, no child sleeps without food. Even the orphan feels like he has parents. If you want to talk about what it means to be African, what the world needs, we never had orphanages in Africa. We never had places of old age in Africa. We took care of our parents. We took care of the orphans. We took care of those. For me, that to me is the rebuilding of Africa. Those are the values that we've forgotten. Those are the values that even other cultures are looking at and aspiring. That, wow, look at this. In Africa, we never had divorce because your wife was not just your wife, but also the family was part of that. Of course, there were other issues and challenges around that, but we never had issues of divorce and father deficiency. And for me, decoloniality must also it mustn't just be a theory that is debated and discussed, conversations on lecture halls and StreamYard and Zoom and Skype. We need to go there and do the best we can to develop our people. Be there where the rubber meets the road.
Powerful.
All those who are in need.
Yes. Professor Edith, your final words?
Well, all what I could say is that Africa has experienced a lot of things: slave trade, imperialism, colonialism, apartheid, neocolonialism, neoliberalism, and all, in the form of structural adjustment, the Washington Consensus, and today globalization, and today coloniality. So we will also realize that the process of decolonization did not succeed in removing coloniality. So the myth of, for me, the myth of the whole colonial project, the myth that we need to demystify the myth in the world that somehow colonization has ended. That is the biggest myth that we need to be vigilant and guard against this as we go forward, as we want to make the world a better place. And I believe that Africa can show the world a better face of humanity if we take this seriously, rather than actually wanting to attack. We can give the world a better picture of what it's supposed to be.
Nice one. Dr. Matema, final words?
I teach leadership, and one of the issues I address is what Professor Mbiki, who I don't know where he is now, said that there are several leadership development paradigms which we must incorporate in developing people. If you talk about Europeans, you read their history, they were conditioned. For many years, they focused on the French philosopher who said, I think, therefore I am. I think, and that took the Europeans very far in thinking, because it became a kind of a mantra to them as they developed. And if you go to Asia, Asians say, I am because I improve. The Asians will take what other people have produced and make sure that it becomes better and better. If you look at Japanese products today, I don't know about you, I don't like any other car, I want a Japanese car. It's because they have improved what other people invented. So the Asians will say, I am because I improve.
I improve.
And then the Americans, I lived in America for many years, so I understand those people. Americans say, I am an individual hero, I initiate, let me go. They are very individualistic. And that's the emphasis there. And people grow up with that mentality. I'm an individual, leave me, let me go. If I want to fly, leave me alone.
Right.
But then when you come to the African, the general paradigm is,
Talk to us.
Because we are community. And for the African, you are a human being because of other human beings.
Yes.
So, if you look at these paradigms, bring them together, I tell you, you will put together and produce a synergy that will take humanity to a very high level. Instead of taking one and say, this one is the most important, is superior. No! God knew that these things will happen and that we would need one another as human beings. No matter how we look like, no matter where we come from, when we come together, things will happen that may not happen if we are divided and separated. So that's why I think we are addressing a very important issue here. We need to help one another to think globally while operating locally. We are somewhere. That's the genius of being a Seventh Adventist member.
That's such a quotable quote. Pastor Ngwaru, let's go for it for our closing remarks.
Yes, let me, before I thank our panelists and yourself, Sane, there is a viewer who sent some message on one of our phones here in my house, and they're saying, please, I understand the issues of colors, but Jesus Christ, in terms of physical color, the mother was a Jew, so what color did he pick? And I'm sure if the viewer, if you are listening, Mary was a Jew, Jesus must have picked also the Jewish color. If you have a problem understanding the Jewish color, look at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and you look at his color. That is more or less the color that Jesus picked. But I like the idea that the issue of being white or being black is non-consequential. What is important is the character of God as revealed in Jesus. That's the color we go for. My panelists, words fail me. I don't know what to say. Would like to thank you for your contribution, Sane. Thank you for being my co-host. We wish to invite you once again in our future presentations. We are going to be looking at social justice. I also see that the church is addressing social justice. Pastors are preaching social justice. Politicians are preaching social justice. We also want to look at that in terms of the way we are free to discuss this. We also, if you are comfortable, we may invite you to that other discussion as well. But otherwise, Sane, from my desk, I'm happy that we went through this discussion. I think it clarified a lot of issues. Even me, I have a better understanding of decoloniality. I thought decoloniality was attacking white people, attacking Asians, attacking anyone who is not black, throwing away every product that was not invented in Africa. But the panelists have helped me to appreciate the globalness of decoloniality and appreciate our space as Africans in the world of knowledge, in the world of power, in the world of being. I don't know. I'll leave it to you.
That's fine. No, I was just scrolling through the comments here. As I turned in the color, everybody's about the color. I think I would advise that if you still want more, just rewind the video after we are done, and then try and see if you'll be able to pick. But look, it's a very deep thing. We can't obviously exhaust it in 1 hour, but I think we tried our level best. But we appreciate all your comments, and we'll try and see if there's need for us to come back. But I think we have tried our level best on this one. And thank you so much, Dr. Papu. Thank you so much, Dr. Matema. Professor Edith, I think you gave it your best shots. The purpose of this platform is to encourage thinking. But we don't just follow just because so and so said. We must think. All of us must engage and think and discuss and be open about issues. And I'm glad that you managed to speak without hiding behind corners and so forth. So I really appreciate the honesty for that. Also, I appreciate the audience who have stayed with us up to this time. We appreciate. Please continue to support us. Join us again next week. The platforms to follow: we have got Let's Talk with Pastor Ngwaru on YouTube. We have got SID Media Digital on YouTube, and then we've got SID Media on Facebook. If you have any burning question after you've watched and rewatched this video again, please feel free to inbox us. Feel free to inbox Pastor Ngwaru. I won't say feel free to inbox Pastor Pabu and Professor, because I'm not sure what their schedule is. I think they're very busy. But you can inbox Pastor Ngwaru and we'll try and give you, more responses as we go with that. But thank you so much. Until next time, good night and God bless you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.